In this module, we're going to talk about UC services and service profiles. And really, this is just a part of a larger capability that we're calling Jabber Service Discovery. So let's jump on into it, talk about how service discovery works, and then configure some UC services and service profiles. In this module, we're going to start out by giving you an overview of what Jabber Service Discovery is. It's really quite simple, but I think it'll save a lot of confusion if we talk about it. Once we've covered the basics of Jabber Service Discovery, we're going to go through and configure UC services and UC service profiles on the Cisco Unified Communications Manager server. And finally, we're going to review the user assignment process for UC service profiles. When we talk about Jabber Service Discovery, it's really quite straightforward. We're going to use a DNS SRV record to allow our Jabber for Windows client to discover the services that are available to us as published by the call manager. And more specifically, what are they and how do I connect to them? It's really straightforward to set up an SRV record, and depending on what kind of DNS server you're using, the process may be slightly different, but you're going to end up with a record formatted as shown below. _Cisco-UDS._TCP.domain SRV 01 8443 and then CUCM server.domain. So let me walk you through what this is. We're defining an SRV service called Cisco UDS. It is a TCP service for a given domain. So in my example, it would be _Cisco-UDS._TCP.cisco.lab. And then SRV is the record type. 0 and 1, those have to do with weights, so you could make those 0001. For the purposes of this demonstration, that's not going to affect it at all. 8443 is the port we're going to connect on. And then CUCM server.domain is going to be the call manager, so cucmpub.cisco.lab. So what's going to happen is Jabber's going to fire up. It's going to do a service discovery. It's going to find this SRV record, and basically it's going to be instructed, hey, connect via call manager. Once the connection has been made, we're going to retrieve the service profile from the call manager, and it's going to have various settings on all of the different UC services that we've defined, including things like what is my conferencing service and how do I connect to it? Where do I go for voicemail and messaging? What do I do for CTI, and what servers are going to allow me to do telephony control of my phone? Where do I connect for IM and presence, etc.? So it's really pretty straightforward. And these settings are things that we used to either have to embed in the MSI or pass as command line parameters or configure in a Jabber XML file that we would download and then, do configuration from. But Service Discovery has really made this a lot simpler and a lot easier to set up. So trust me, this is the way you want to be doing things. So use your SRV records. If you want to create multiple, if you've got more than one call manager and you want to have some load balancing or redundancy, you can make, equally weighted or different weights of SRV records for the Cisco UDS setting. So it's really easy to get an HA configuration with this as well. So with that, let's jump into the call manager and let's go through configuration of our UC services and service profiles. Jabber for Windows is going to use a process called service discovery in order to learn about provisioned services that it's going to interact with. This wasn't always the case. It used to be that we would hard code various configuration parameters into an XML configuration file, and then we would download that via TFTP, and Jabber would learn, how to interact and communicate with other servers using that. Now, you can still use that file, and there are still cases where we need to use that file, but deployment has been greatly simplified here in the latest couple of versions using service profiles. So I want to talk to you about UC services and UC service profiles. All of this configuration is going to happen within the Unified Communications Manager. So let's walk through some of this. If you go into the Unified CM administration page and go to User Management and go to User Settings, you'll see two options. One of them is UC Service and one is Service Profile. So a service profile is a collection of UC services grouped together that we then assign to end users. And I'll walk you through that process, but let's start at the ground and work our way up by talking about UC services. I'll go ahead and click UC service. We'll click Find to look for services, and you'll see that none have been defined. I'm going to click Add New and walk you through adding some of the most common types of services that we're going to be using in our Jabber deployment. In no particular order, we have voicemail, mail store, conferencing, directory, IM and presence, CTI, and video conferencing scheduling portal. Now, it's not mandatory that you use all of these, but I'm going to walk you through the configuration of the most common ones, starting out with IM and presence. We'll click Next. The product type is Unified CM, IM, and presence. You can also define a product type of WebEx. So this would be if you were using like WebEx Messenger in the cloud, but this course is about on-premise. So we're going to talk, and actually don't get me into the whole on-premise versus on-premises thing. I know there's been a lot of dialogue about that lately. On-prem, how about that? So we're going to configure the on-prem presence server. I'm going to call this service IMP. And I'm going to give it a description of IM and presence service. And the host name, or specifically FQDN, fully qualified domain name, is going to be imp01.cisco.lab. Now, the reason I'm using fully qualified domain name here, this is very, very important. My certificates that Jabber is going to use to secure communication with each of these UC servers needs to match the value that I'm defining here. So because my certificates are going to be issued using fully qualified domain name, and by the way, we're going to talk about certificate issuance in the next module, we need to make sure they match. So imp01.cisco.lab. So we've defined an IM and presence service. Let's hit Add New and add some more service types. Let's go ahead and add a CTI service. This is going to have to do with phone control. We'll call it CTI. Let me get down here to the name field. There we go. We will give it a host name of CUCMPub.cisco.lab, and this is going to be our call manager that we're using for CTI. We're going to do some more here. Add new. We're going to add two of them that have to do with a feature called visual voicemail. Now, I'm going to warn you before we go in here, some of what you're going to see, the way Cisco has labeled things is a bit confusing. In fact, some of it's just downright wrong. And, you know, I don't know if it was historically right and it's just wrong now, but it's certainly wrong now. But bear with me. We'll do both these. So voicemail and mail store, both of these we're going to configure to be able to support visual voicemail. So we'll hit Next. The product type is either going to be Unity or Unity Connection. I'm going to use Unity Connection, and we'll give it a name of CUC for Cisco Unity Connection. And the host name will be cucpub.cisco.lab. And we'll take the default port of 443 with HTTP, hit Save. And now we're going to add new. We're going to add one for mail store. And I'm going to give this a different name, ms-cuc. Now you notice how it says product type exchange? That's the lie that I said that they're telling you. This is not pointing to exchange. Let me say that again. This is not pointing to exchange. This is pointing to Unity Connection. So on our hostname IP address field, we will say cucpub.cisco.lab again and hit save. So now we've configured the mail store profile. Let's go back to our list, and you'll see we've configured a CTI profile, a voicemail profile, an IM presence profile, and a mail store profile. And you can name these whatever you want. These are arbitrary names that I decided on. Depending on what you're deploying feature-wise in your environment, you may add more. And let me show you some of them, even though I'm not going to complete them because I'm not demoing them here in this environment. Conferencing is a service type that you may be adding. And you may be tying either to a Meeting Place Classic, Meeting Place Express, or WebEx conferencing service. So let's say, for example, I was going to configure it for WebEx. I would give it a name. We would point to the WebEx server that our company was assigned. We've got ports, and then we've got user web conference server as SSO identity providers. So you'll see that there's some SSO single sign-on capability within here. Again, that's out of the scope of this class. We're not going to cover that. But you can do WebEx and Meeting Place integration with Jabber for Windows. We'll go back to Find List, and I'll show you some more of these services that could be provisioned. Let me show you directory, and then I'll tell you why I'm not using it today. Directory services have to do with connecting to LDAP. And up until somewhere in the version 9-ish era, and I give you a specific example, but in my questions to Cisco's BU, I've gotten mixed responses and a little bit of, how do I say it, conflicting information as far as when this actually began to be honored. But most of my integrations with Jabber for small medium businesses are what I call, or what are called, a UDS integration, and that is where Call Manager integrates with LDAP and Jabber or Presence integrates with Call Manager. So we're getting LDAP information, but it's flowing through Call Manager. Larger scale deployments may use what's called BDI or EDI, so Basic Directory Integration or Enhanced Directory Integration, where Jabber is going to communicate with LDAP directories natively. I'm not doing a whole lot of those these days. I'm just a really, really big fan of UDS deployments. Yes, there's some scalability issues with them. For example, you can only support, I think the number is 50% of the amount of sessions for UDS that your Call Manager is scaled to support. So let's say, for instance, you had a 2,500 user template on your Call Manager. You can only use half of that many UDS users, and it just has to do with performance numbers. So, directory service configuration, this is where you can tell the Presence server how to natively communicate with LDAP. That's not something that I am typically doing, so we will leave that blank. And in fact, this was available, and this is some of the conflicting information I was telling you about. This was available in 9x, but you could configure it, and even though it was configured, the Jabber client wouldn't use it. And I don't know exactly which versions did and did not, but they were advising us that we shouldn't be using this. And I think that that's going away in 10. I'm pretty sure that it can be used. But again, I'm doing a UDS deployment. This is not important to me in this example, so we can disregard it. There is one more type of UC service that is definable here, and that is your video conference scheduling portal. And you'll see, again, it's just name, host name, IP address, and a portal URL. And this has to do with tying into the telepresence management system. So we've created some different UC services. Again, one more view here. We'll go back. We've got a CTI UC service, a voicemail service, an IM and presence service, and a mail store service. Now, we need to organize these together into a service profile that's then going to be assigned to our users. So if I go up to User Management, User Settings, and Service Profile, we can hit Find, and there are none. So we'll go ahead and we create one, and we'll call this one the Cisco UC Service Profile. And we'll just say this is our UC Service Profile. And we will make this the default service profile for the system. And keep in mind, the fact that it's allowing me to make it the default kind of implies that you can have more than one. You absolutely can. If you have users on different voicemail servers, if you have users with different feature sets, you may find yourself creating multiple service profiles, and that's okay. Well, now that we've created our service profile, or we've started to create our service profile, let's go ahead and configure it. Our voicemail profile will be CUC for our primary. Had I defined multiple, I could pick a secondary and tertiary. And credential source for voicemail service, we're going to say Unified CM IM Presence. And all this means is when I'm connecting to the voicemail profile or the voicemail server, go ahead and use the same credentials that I'm using for Call Manager. And the reason we're doing that is because both our Call Manager and Unity Connection are LDAP integrated, and they can use a common set of credentials. Mail store profile, again, we're going to pick the Unity Connection server. We will scroll down to IM and Presence profile and pick the IMP profile. We've got our CTIO profile that we created, and we'll select it, and we'll hit Save. We've now created a service profile that groups all of those services together that we had defined. Now that they're grouped together, I can assign them to end users. So if I go to User Management, End User, you'll see here when I hit Find, the end user is defined in my system. And today I've only got one, and he's a local user. User ID is Josh. And if I scroll down, I want you to look at a couple checkboxes. First, Home Cluster under Service Settings. This is necessary to identify this cluster as being my home cluster. Underneath that, Enable User for Unified CM, IM, and Presence. So this is how I turn on Jabber, essentially, for an end user. And then down at the very bottom of Service Settings, you'll see UC Service Profile. So it's going to, by default, pick Use System Default, and then it's showing you what the default is, the Cisco UC Service Profile that we had created. That's perfect. That's fantastic. There are a few other things that are necessary in order to allow full Jabber functionality of the user. Obviously, there are some device associations and line appearance associations that need to be intact. Those have not been configured yet because I haven't configured my phone. You will also want to give the user certain CTI roles. and those are best accomplished using an access control group. So I'll usually pick a group. I'll give that group the CTI rights. I'll give that group the whatever other rights I need. CCM end users so that we can log in. That's important for UDS, etc. Those are not something I'm going to cover in this particular slide set or this module, so I'm going to skip over it for now. But just so you know, those are the parameters that we're going to end up setting on the end users. And we will go back and set them for this user between now and the time that we're actually launching the Jabber client and logging into it. But I don't want to jump ahead of myself here. So let's go ahead and click Save. I just really wanted to show you that the user was enabled for IM and presence and that UC service profile we had created is assigned to the user. In this module, we talked about Jabber service discovery as a process for learning configuration information. We talked about the configuration of UC services and UC service profiles within the Unified Communications Manager application, and we gave you a teaser of what we're going to do to assign those service profiles to the end users, and a little bit of the what's coming down the road as we do some more configuration to the users to Jabber enable them. In the next module, we're going to do a deep dive into certificate. I don't even know what to say. It's going to make your brain hurt. I'm sorry. Certificates are an absolute pain in the neck, but they're an essential part of configuring an on-premise presence solution with Jabber. So we're going to go through, talk about certificate signing requests and how to generate and apply the certs, and just get everything in working order in preparation for the final event here in a couple of modules where we're actually going to be installing Jabber and running it for the first time. So without further ado, we'll wrap this module up. We'll say thanks for watching. Hopefully this has been informative to you, and I'll see you in the next module.